Hey everyone, welcome to Insights IAS ICANN Initiative. So I hope you are liking the way we are able to enrich your answer writing and newspaper analysis episodes. So we'll go to the first topic today, which is going to be about an industry that is booming in India called gaming industry. So as we know, earlier gaming was a kind of entertainment for children, so especially parents were frowned upon it, but children formed the major entertainment. But of late, gaming has bypassed the route of just the young ones. The elder adults are also now using games for escaping out of their mundane lifestyles. So how this gaming industry fares in India, what is its future and what are the challenges are some discussions we are going to do based on a very good editorial in New Indian Express. So if you see, first let's start with the statistics about the industry. So user base, and this is going to be with specific emphasis on India story. User base will be around in India currently is 450 million. So these many people are using or playing games in India. If you put this in economic value, it is around 33,000 crore. So it's a huge potential already, we can say. So penetration of mobile phones in the country has been quite great, though we know many parts of the country still have a digital divide. The ownership of mobile phones, availability of data in cheaper rates, and accessibility to internet to a great extent are the reasons why gaming as an industry is booming in the country. And this gaming is not related to young adults alone. It's also to adults of both genders. So there are many games played by both males and female sections of the society, thus increasing its user base. And now the games are no more related to a small genre of work or very limited way in which a person gets entertained. They have better content and there are newer games or newer genres that is developing that is attracting people with different viewpoints. So with this statistics, let's move forward to see what is the uh, advantage this gaming is having over social media. So we have always heard people tell that gaming leads to addiction. Gaming or sitting before the phones or your video game chambers is not always good for health. It makes a person's activity or may keep cuts off a person's from physically active lifestyle. Keeping all these negatives aside, if we want to work on what are the advantages of gaming over social media addiction, we have many points to go. In fact, running to 2 slides. So let's just focus on what are the advantages. One is it is productive usage of a person's mind, as in the entire gaming, a person is not mundanely scrolling the content as it is in the social media. They're using their thinking, which is definitely making them an active participant in the gaming sport. Then it enables the players to explore, build and modify the game environment, thus bringing out the creativity in them. It'll help people to go for a better conflict resolution in real life, as many of the gaming is related to solving problems or solving many differences. So this enables strengthened conflict resolution in them. So gaming also is considered as an art form. It is integrating storytelling, graphics and music. There are many games whose music has been quite catchy and attracts the people, and this narrating segment that they have used has gone a long way, because gaming is not anybody's cup of tea. That is, creating a game is not a very simple act, but it is considered as an art form these days, thus giving a lot of scope for gaming enthusiasts who create new games for the economy. And this gaming also again can be compared with social media with respect to the attention and concentration it keeps in a place. So as we know, the doomless scrolling in social media is usually associated with or is resulting in uh, attention deficit and hyperactivity disorder. This is a negative byproduct of social media. This attention deficit is not something that the gaming industry would like to induce in the public. They always are attentive, and the gamers have a lot of concentration in the game that they play. So continuing to the next slide, it also induces responsible behavior patterns where people will feel that the way they try to protect their species or clans in the whole gaming place, this behavior of responsibility gets extended to real life as well, which has a major social impact. Then agility in responses means amid crisis in the game, they usually respond to them by using their weapons or being agile in their decision making, which definitely has a major impact on their current scenario. So even in the real life situation, when they face a challenge, the response is going to be quick. So this quick or agile response is very much appreciated in an individual's life. And many of the games contain rules, they give goals, they have interaction, and they have a feedback loop. So this makes a person more interactive with the ecosystem. In a similar manner, making them abiding by the rules, if it is a norm, it is easy for government to implement many of its rules as well. So also there are many games in India which are used to teach a language, teach economics, psychological research, to observe stimulus and response. So gaming is used for multiple researchers and also to teach subjects which will strengthen the whole process of pedagogy and make better or effective education possible in the schools. The same time, games are also used to debunk misleading information. As we know, there was a game created during COVID-19 times. This was the time when lot of fake news was spreading, and there were some games which would tell the players that if you debunk a particular myth or particular fake news, you'll be given so many reward points. So this was a very good model of inducing debunking misleading information. So next we'll go to what is the potential of gaming industry in India. So if you see, it is having an immense potential in the Indian scenario for multiple reasons. Okay, it is, if you see, considering the demographic, we have a huge demography in India who would like to play gaming. We have, as told, high-speed internet. We have a huge technology talent that exists in the country, and India is having good amount of population that is having digital fluency, right? So when all this is available in India in a right portion, it is having a great potential is something we can tell. Potential for economic growth as in paper 3, or potential for using it as a good industry for social tuning of the people. So what is the projected revenue we might get? So this estimate is somewhere around by 2030 we are talking about. So it is projected to give around 66,000 crore of revenue. So it's not 2030, it is just 2028 itself, just a few years from now. It is having a potential of generating 66,000 crore revenue and has the potential also to create 2 lakh jobs. So it's a very good way of increasing employment in the country. What are the drivers of the growth now? What support is needed for them? It is especially training of fresh talents. Drivers of the growth mainly would be funding. It may be various government sources, it may be some seed capital funders who would like to entertain the gaming industry. There have been many instances where these kind of initiatives have already taken place. And the next one, other support facilities will include a proper training system established by the government, where people are actually trained in this case. And we can also see that some research facilities with respect to making the gaming experience even more better, identifying the fresh talents. So this would definitely make sure India is having a great potential for gaming industry. Right. So next would be National Center of Excellence for Animation, Visual Effects, Gaming in Comics and Extended Reality. This has already been proposed by the government to be established in Mumbai as a center of excellence for animation, visual effects, gaming, comics and extended reality. So in addition to this, let's say we tweak the games based on Indian traditions, we tweak the games or try to create games based on Indian lifestyles, it would also act as a soft power in the world. So as you know, gaming industry is not limited to a country alone. The games would be downloaded by people across the world, thus pushing forward India's culture or popularizing India's culture among the youth. So is it all good about gaming industry? Now let's go to negatives of gaming industry. Instead of negatives, we can put it as what are the challenges faced in the negative industry, gaming industry. So as it's seen, there's a huge risk of money laundering where people may spend their black money on betting and gambling in games, which is definitely a challenging one for government to handle. And what are the other dangers? There are many dangers, especially to the youngsters, as gaming gives them a lot of exposure to violence, particularly young players. It can simulate aggression among the people, and this aggression also is seen in real life as well. And if you go by the terms of WHO often calls addiction to games as a mental health issue. So when all these are the challenges, so I think we have tackled many other psychological challenges in many ways. So instead of banning gaming or regulating it in a better way, we can definitely go a long way in creating games out of this whole segment. That is, it will have a lot of GDP contribution. So where to use this topic or where to use this news item? As I've just told, GS paper 3, we may directly get a question as in what's the potential of gaming industry in India. We may also get some question related to what are the opportunities that are existing in India for creating employment. Gaming industry could be a apt way. At the same time, when we talk about GS paper 4, bringing behavioral change or bringing attitudinal change in the public, using certain engaging games among the public will definitely go a long way in using this in your case studies especially. So with this article, there was a very good conclusion of the article where the author spoke about, just a minute, we'll just complete the now coming to the solution part. So how is the solution or how can we go about by the solution here? Effective enforcement, that is government regulating the gaming industry in an effective manner with proper rules and regulations. It can be acting as a good economic opportunity. Voluntary code of ethics. Already the gaming industry is bound by a code of ethics created by their own entity. If government continues and helps them out in a better way, ethical gaming can also be a norm of the day. So content regulation, or what kind of videos need to be made, what kind of themes of gaming can be introduced. So that regulation can be done by the government side. Built-in safeguards by gaming platform, especially with respect to data safety. This needs to be made a norm by the government. Age appropriate grading of games, that is depending on the age of the individual, whether accessibility to the game should be given or not should be justified here. Then parental monitoring. So this would be the crux of the gaming sector as it is also an addictive area. Parental monitoring or control of this and awareness among the parents to allow a limited screen time would also go a long way in encouraging India's gaming industry. This article was written by a former bureaucrat. The ending part of this about a very interesting theory. Okay, it is called the theory of simulation. So this theory would go a long way for our application in GS paper 4 and ethics. But if we discuss this today, the episode is going to be very lengthy. I think we'll reserve this theory of simulation for the next episode. And do remember, this is based on a very popular Hollywood movie as well. So we have a practice question for you today. And as promised for the question asked in the previous episode, the model answer or the content part is posted in the description box. Please go through it and also look into what content you have developed for it. So today's practice question would be, discuss the potential of the gaming industry in India as an economic driver, highlighting the opportunities, challenges, and the role of government in shaping its future. So do write about this. We have already discussed most part of it. So instead of, let's say, putting the content in your comment box, I would like to give you a task of giving a very good introduction to this particular topic in news. Okay, I would like the viewers to give a very good introduction to this question in our comment box, so that content part is already discussed. If you are ready with a good introduction, you can go smoothly towards the answer. So now going to the next topic, it is directly related to our DS paper 4, where Kerala government has suspended 2 IAS officers for official misconduct. So I think you have already gone through the news. It is nothing about one bureaucrat who has created a WhatsApp group, and that is both having religious connotations and regional connotations. So having these two identities in one's public space is not a good trait expected out of a civil servant. Because of this instance, the officer A has been suspended. The officer B in this case is expected to have violated a chain of command. Has contacted the media and spoke ill about one of the seniors in their own organization, which is again a trait which makes a person unbecoming of a bureaucrat. So if you see this in the daily life of bureaucrats, we usually have these kind of ideas where one's personal choices conflicts with one's official or one's professional life. So in this particular case, if we take, we can analyze what are the issues that come up here, especially from the code of conduct perspective, or also from the perspective of the becoming or unbecoming of a bureaucrat. So as we have seen, 2024 mains ethics question had a question about code of conduct violation. So if we see what are the qualities that the individual has violated in this case, the first one will be impartiality. So treating all citizens equally without biasness in religion, race, caste, region is something that is showing that a person is impartial. So when a person is expressing their communal or regional affiliation, it erodes the trust in the public or in the officer's ability to make fair and unbiased decisions. That's why impartiality is a very important trait of a bureaucrat. And the second important quality would be integrity. These are the terms you would have seen continuously in your ethics paper. So integrity is about upholding honesty and moral uprightness in the service. So allowing people or, having sectarian preferences, it would influence actions. These compromise the ethical standards and again, public trust. So many ethical standards are violated here. And we have another quality that's violated, that is objectivity. That is taking decisions based on evidence, merit, fairness, rather than personal judgment in any case. So violation of this is, if it is coming from communal or regional loyalties, it would definitely result in unfair decision making, which is making a bureaucrat unbecoming of a civil servant again. At the same time, the fourth value that has been violated is non-partisanship. These are a quality of civil servant where a person maintains political and ideological neutrality, especially when they are going for any public policies. So, how this is wrong or why non-partisanship is not correct, it indicates communal or regional favoritism. Okay, it is nothing but showing partisanship or favoritism, which will make sure all the citizens are not treated equally. The next ideal would be commitment to constitutional values. Constitutional values, which are form the crux of a bureaucrat's life, where you follow ideas like secularism, equality, justice. So favoring one community or regional contradicts, it completely goes against the idea of egalitarian ethos of constitution. And the most important one here is leadership. So acting as a role model, bureaucrats who are role models inspire confidence and unity in diverse communities. So these kind of factors definitely damage the moral authority and leadership expected from a bureaucrat. So this case study can be used by you when you get a question in GS paper 4 on what are the good qualities of a leader, or what acts make unbecoming of a civil servant. Do quote this example and tell this example violates so and so principles of morality. Fine. So they violate principles of justice, equality, secularism. Hence, IAS officers must uphold these values to maintain their credibility and integrity of the civil services. The next topic is a very interesting initiative started in Delhi Government School. So it is called House Rani Ek Kahani. So we have read enough about how uniquely the Delhi government is trying to mold an education system in the government schools to make them attractive to the public and also to give quality education to people who are underprivileged, to give equal opportunity to them. So see, what is this initiative of House Rani is? We all have studied history in our school days. So till we came to UPSC, we were never so focused on reading history, or most of the time we regarded it as a boring subject, as they were not teaching us as in how to interpret history or why to read. So in Delhi government now, House Rani Ek Kahani is about organizing local trips to the students. So it is starting from class 6 onwards, where children will be taken to local communities around them. So we have heard that our grandparents tell that when we were young, this area was not like this. There was not a single home. There were many other structures. There was a lake, but now everything has changed. So instead of randomly telling all this to children, the Delhi government has taken an initiative of roping in some history experts and other important orators here, who can take the kids to local areas and show that, see, there was a lake here. If there was a historical monument, and in case of Delhi, we can find n number of it, those monuments will be mapped using AI tools. And this idea will be told to the kids that this is how a city evolves. That is, all these structures were one of the most important parts of our history, but now they are all in ruins, or they have been conserved by Archaeological Survey of India, and how this lake or this monument has led to development of the locality in the area. And if you see, horse was used during Mughals. Horse is basically a water tank in which water is stored, and baulis are the other water storing structures. So house and Bauli has led to many areas being named after these water bodies. So instead of rote learning of history, or instead of just memorizing the wars as the traditional perspective goes, this history beyond the four walls is something what the entire country needs to emulate. And as we are in the right crux of a time when we are implementing new education policy, ideas like House Rani Ek Kahani would be very interesting way of telling our history to the children. So as we are already talking about Delhi government's initiatives, let's briefly look into some other events, other kind of elements taken by Delhi government's education. One of the most important of them being happiness curriculum. So in this happiness curriculum, every day the students will have one period of their schooling in which they talk about basic human values. So we often talk about value education, and these classes are not going on well. But in Delhi's case, every day the value education or human values will talk about ideas like compassion, topics like mindfulness is discussed, and what is the importance of kindness in the society. These are discussed through stories and interactions, making the period and the class very lively, and it will make something for which students come forward to the school. So happiness curriculum is one. The second one is the idea of emphasizing on mental health of kids. So as most of the government schools get students from underprivileged section, they would be facing many mental health challenges related to, let's say, domestic violence in the house, child abuse by parents or other relatives. So many times comparison with others also comes into picture here. So mental health will be done by identifying and frequent counseling session, referring the kids to government mental health institutes if they really are in a disturbed state of mind, is a beautiful initiative started by Delhi government. And the third important one we can talk about is Business Blasters program. So in Business Blasters program, the commerce students from class 11th and 12th will have one weekly interaction with business tycoons. That may be a small entrepreneur who has started a business, big business leaders who have made a lot of difference in the society. So it is basically teaching children how to take a risk in life, how to make business decisions. So instead of merely studying and by hearting and writing answers in business management, this real life interaction has gone a long way. So government has also teamed up with giving short loans to the kids here who have turned into entrepreneurs already. That is, Delhi government has students who are just in 11th and 12th but are earning lakhs of rupees per year because of the loan given to them. So this is how we can make sure education is a lively experience, and whatever we go through in the education system stays with us throughout. So I think most of you would be able to relate something here, right? That is, in 2023, we had a mains essay question about education is what remains after one has forgotten what one has learnt in the school. That is, most of the time when someone asks us, what did you learn? We might have forgotten it, but what we have experienced is something which goes forward with us, and that is what makes a civilized citizen and a useful human resource. So you can use this in essays like education, questions of education in GS paper 2, and also especially happiness curriculum plays a major role in GS paper 4, ethics through education, or role of educational institutions in imparting ethics. The next topic is about the work of care. So if you recall our first episode, we had spoken about an alternative economic perspective in the form of meta-economics, where lives and interests and benefits of people go hand in hand with the economic growth. Thus, we were talking about economic development or equitable resources or distribution of resources. In the same manner, this article focuses on care economics, that is, integrating care as a feature of human well-being into economic activities. So here, the author talks about care and support. They compass all ways we nurture each other and respond to our need for emotional and psychological and physical nutrition. Look at the terms they have used here: emotional, psychological, and physical nutrition for the body and for the people is coming from care and support. So, unfortunately, celebration of care is not seen as big as celebrating the growth as well. That is, if a person is very affectionate towards an individual, that is not valued much to economic growth or support given by the people. So this paradox is observed by the author. Followed by, there's a perception of late amongst the youngsters and other sections of the society that it is too cool to care. That is, people are mindful enough to take care of their own needs. You need not worry about them. So being careless is considered to be too cool and a trend these days. So going forward, how can we develop an economy centered around care, and how does it look like? So the idea is we need to reward people who are into care economy. So if you see, for that matter, in India, 360 million children and 147 million elderly people, they are in need of some kind of care or the other. And who caters to all this care? None other than the women segment of the society. That is, they cater to the demands. However, if you see, most of the time working women, it is told that around 7 to 8 hours of a day a woman gives into caring the elderly and the children and other members of family, but remuneration wise the woman remains unpaid. So there is unpaid care that is going on here, and especially when it comes to a woman who is employed, she still spends some 5.6 hours every day in giving care to her family, compared to just 2 hours of even an unemployed male member of the family. So keeping this in mind, the author suggests that we need to take care of heightening the tax brackets. We need to work on wage rate equality. We need to work on retirement plans tailor-made for women who can balance between the care and the economic opportunities between which they have to constantly juggle. So if you see, the same care economy from the government side also exists, where we have ASHA workers, we have Anganwadi workers about whom we discussed yesterday. So this care economy in total, to our surprise, contributes to around 15 to 17% of our GDP. But unfortunately, we are not tapping the economic value of care. So next is, traditionally, when we feel that we need some emotional support or care, we tend to look towards our family. So traditional idea of care and support comes from family, but here the author talks about public caring of individual also is extremely relevant. That is, however romanticized the idea of Indian family today is, we see that not much support is given to the elderly especially. So this is the time when the author talks about social pensions given in an adequate manner, strong public infrastructure where senior citizens can move themselves easily without any support, some kind of subsidies to take care of children who are in need of help. So all these are some ways of integrating care into economic opportunities. And the third one is value of work of care as a society. That is, in society, we usually feel that as a mother, yes, caring is her feature and it's a responsibility. She's doing it. It is the responsibility of a person to get up and give seat to senior citizens. It is their responsibility. We don't acknowledge care, or we don't give it the due recognition it ought to get. Correct? So, a great scholar called Nell Noddings has told in her book that there is a need of a radical revolution of how society values the caregivers. And in society, people who care for another person through series of routine of, each, and when they encounter each other, it could persuade them to care for others against injustices and inequality as well. So in a simple manner, if we feel that I care for my fellow beings, whether they are related to me or not, we can definitely bring some kind of attention against injustices, where if somebody is undergoing an injustice, we'll speak up for them. So in this matter, the author tells that when the society values the care work, it can definitely go for economic integration. Right? So the author concludes by telling, if politicians and policymakers wish to incentivize more childbirth, that is, as many times we are seeing that population increase, we are talking about the matter. So if they want a productive and healthy workforce, we need to care about encouraging and rewarding our intrinsic insights. People usually have this intrinsic incentive of helping someone, but we usually take a back step thinking whether we may face a trouble out of it, or are we really going to benefit. So that hidden intrinsic instincts have to be historically recognized, and the hidden acts of care needs to come to the fore. So beyond the economy propelled by consumption, that is, we are talking about materialistic economy here, we need to talk about love, desire, care, concern, and connection. Take the latter more seriously, because we have often spoken about social capital, and care economy definitely is an important commodity under social capital. So if you are asked a question in GS paper 3 related to what are the various alternatives in which India can grow in the coming years along with an equitable distribution of resources, remember to mention meta economics is one example we have discussed. The second would be care economics, both of them are contributing to the GDP, plus equitable distribution of resources. So the last topic of the day is a story between Deputy Superintendent of Police Mr. Santosh Patel and a vegetable vendor called Salman Khan from the state of Madhya Pradesh. So Salman Khan used to give vegetables free of cost to Mr. Santosh when there were some tough times, and these small gestures have created lasting bond and has always inspired the general public. So if you see in this case, Mr. Patel tracks down the vegetable vendor after many years and congratulates him or expresses his gratitude that this humble gesture of Salman Khan when he was a student has made him a very humble individual when he is in service as well. So the story of Salman Khan, a vegetable vendor, and Santosh Patel exemplifies how empathy and compassion can transform the lives. So if you take the idea that how UPSC has been asking question in ethics, in 2023 we had got a question called the simplest act of kindness are by and far more powerful than 1,000 heads bowing in prayer, according to Mahatma Gandhi ji. So how this quote or what this quote means to you in the present context was the question. So in instances like that, we need not go very far away and become too unique in our examples, or try to find some extraordinary examples. So the example of Salman Khan here is very well reflected in idea of what exactly kindness means in our daily life. So let us just see how this incident helps us to add more value in our ethics answer. So if you see, both Salman Khan and Santosh Patel have shown their ethics in a true form here. So in the first way, we can talk about compassion and altruism. So altruism is a concept where we talk about giving something to others without any individual or personal gains. So as a vegetable vendor, he has empathized Santosh Patel's struggles, and as a student, he has selflessly offered the vegetables for free. So this shows that how small of acts of kindness can make significant differences. Second one, from the perspective of a bureaucrat, this interpersonal relationship will help in developing good social capital around this, we can say, society, which will not only build mutual respect but also enhances the trust that public has on officials like Mr. Santosh Patel in this case. So the third value we can learn here is value of gratitude. That is how we are thankful to the things our life is providing us on a daily basis. And gratitude practicing is one of the important components of a good virtue of a leader. So this story is demonstrating how acts of kindness are not forgotten and can inspire others to pay it forward, thereby creating a cycle of goodness in the society. Correct? This cycle will definitely make society a better place to live for everyone. So the fourth important feature we learn from this idea is ethics in leadership and governance. So a civil servant inspired by this could ensure inclusivity, fairness in governance, and would prioritize the needs of the underprivileged, and it goes by the idea lead by example. Right? So the next one could be certain moral lessons for personal integrity. So here, Salman's selflessness and Santosh's gratitude both are reflecting how ethical behavior in personal life influences broader social dynamics. So this can illustrate how personal virtues like integrity, altruism, thankfulness, it enhances the moral character and serves as, guiding principles of ethical decision making. So with this, we'll end today's ICANN discussion. So wait for the introduction in a different way that we would like to give from our end. Stay tuned for the next episode. Thank you so much.